Greetings to all, and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about death. While there aren't many things in third density that we can be certain of, one thing we do know for sure is that our current third density incarnation will end in what we call death. Today, we're joined by Greg and Peggy Lester, two longtime teachers and students of the Law of One, who have also served for many years in hospice care, assisting many incarnated souls through their death experience. What can we learn from Greg and Peggy that can help us be at peace with death if we're not so already? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups at the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also meet on Facebook. We do also have a Facebook page, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. Just contact us at seattlelaw1@gmail.com if you would like to get on our mailing list. We do send out emails once a week to let you know what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&As with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Tricia Bean from the L&L Research Channeling team. Just go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button if you would like to get notifications when we upload new videos, and contact us at seattlelaw1@gmail.com if you would like to join in any of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, as mentioned, our episode today is about death. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself to our viewers, let them know who you are and where you're calling from. Starting with Peggy.
Hi, I'm Peggy Lester, and Greg and I now live in Northern Kentucky. I have just retired from a career in nursing. I've been a nurse for 43 years, and I was a palliative nurse practitioner for the past 7 years. And that's where I've really gotten my experience with patients with chronic illness and patients at end of life. But also a lot of experience with family members and utilizing hospice for their end of life experience. And just very interested in it for myself, as I do have chronic illness and an advanced cancer. So I'm working with this whole part of third density myself.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that wealth of knowledge and experience and love with us. And that's why you're here. That's why you're on the panel. Greg, would you like to introduce?
Sure, I'm Greg Holden. We do have different last names. She didn't want the name Holden for some reason. I lived most of my life in Chicago, Illinois. I've always been interested in stories. I was a reporter. That was my first job. I wrote stories about people in my hometown. And I got a job as an editor at University of Chicago, where I stumbled into writing some of the early books about the World Wide Web and the internet and starting a business online. And they always included stories. Had brought up 2 kids, became a Buddhist about 1989 and 1990, Tibetan Buddhist. Had a teacher for many years named Gelek Rinpoche. So much of my worldview and my interest in the Law of One is informed by Tibetan Buddhism. I've just always been fascinated by the congruences between them. Came to chaplaincy later in life, not until 1916. I became a chaplain.
2016.
Oh, sorry, 2016. That's why it's good. That's why it's good she's here. And was a volunteer at Rainbow Hospice in the Chicago area, and then a chaplain at another hospice, and then professional chaplain at the palliative care service at a big hospital in the Midwest, one of the largest hospitals in the country for the poor and uninsured.
And that is why you're on the podcast as well, my friend. Thank you for being here. And sorry for fucking up the intro at the very beginning. I'll see if I can fix that in edits. Greg Holden, Peggy Lester, a married couple and longtime teachers.
Okay.
No worries, no worries.
Well, now you got a little bit of taste of the patriarchy and what it feels like to be a woman in a patriarchal society. Yeah.
It was way too much paperwork to change my name.
Yeah, well, appreciate that, and appreciate our viewers for being patient, because I'm not going to edit anything. Whatever you saw, that's what you're going to get in the final product. Otherwise, I did want to remind our viewers, as always, that none of us here are experts in the law of one. We are just normal people like you, hanging out and sharing a little bit of our lives and experiences, and anything that we say could be wrong. You are welcome to disagree with anything that any of us say. Otherwise, if you are already familiar with the law of one and the entity known as quo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on planning your death. Otherwise, for those who are new to the law of one, you can think of it as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. All of the reading passages we're looking at today came to us through the process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, inner planes beings, spirits of the deceased, higher self, and so on. Basically, a channel serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak to, and in this case, those entities would appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are two types of channeling that have been developed by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, meaning they are subconscious or unconscious, as if asleep, meaning they're really not aware of what words are coming out of their mouths as they're speaking. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra back in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but deep meditative state, meaning they're only somewhat aware of what words are coming out of their mouth as they're speaking them. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Quo, starting in the mid-1980s all the way up to present day. Who is Quo? You can think of Quo as a group entity made up of three social memory complexes: Ra at 6th density, Latwi at 5th density, Hatan at 4th density. You can think of a social memory complex as a planetary consciousness. It would be as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one group mind. You can think of densities or dimensions as different levels of consciousness or reality, as those two things are very closely intertwined. Imagine, if you will, that the elements of earth, fire, water, and air had some form of consciousness, as many indigenous peoples have been saying they do for centuries. We would call whatever that is first density. You can think of second density as the level of consciousness of plants or animals, a significant quantum leap above and beyond the consciousness of what we would refer to as inanimate matter. You can think of third density as the level of consciousness of humans or cetaceans like whales and dolphins. Again, a significant quantum leap in consciousness beyond that of plants or other animals. You can think of fourth density as the level of consciousness of social memory complexes. Again, it would be as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one single planetary consciousness. Clearly a quantum leap above and beyond the consciousness of one individual human. You can think of fifth density as whatever would be a comparable quantum leap above that of fourth density, and fifth density is whatever would be a comparable quantum leap above and beyond fifth density. It is, of course, more complicated than that, but for now, suffice it to say, the entity known as Quo can be thought of as three planetary consciousnesses working together: Ra at 6th density, Latwi at 5th density, and Hatan at 4th density. First contact with Quo was made by the L&L Research Channeling Team back in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the Ra contact in 1984. They have been channeled pretty much every month since then, up to and including present day, by the L&L Research Channeling Team. You can find sessions, transcripts of those sessions in the L&L Conscious Channeling Library shown on your screen. Otherwise, before we get into our first channeling passage, there was a passage from something written a long time ago in the Anguttara Nikaya. Peggy and Greg, I believe you are both familiar with this. Would you like to comment on it a little bit before we look at our first passage? Let me start with Peggy.
Sure. This is a translation from Thich Nhat Hanh. And so this is actually a part of a meditation that you can do if you are wanting to sit and meditate on moving through the processes of dying. And it's just a way for us to normalize it, I feel. It's a way for us to really understand that dying is all part of this experience, and that everyone around us will experience this too. And I love the last statement, that my actions are my only true belongings, and that the consequences of my actions are, the ground that I stand on. And so this is karma, right? So it is that piece of us where it does make us want to think about, what are we doing in this life? And are we spreading love? Because that, again, I think fits perfectly with the law of one, that we are one and one is the love. So
For sure. And I apologize. Normally, I would have read this out loud before we discussed it, but because this was a thing that came about relatively recently, and I did not prepare for this episode as thoroughly as I usually do, I just neglected to read this out loud for our viewers. Let's go ahead and read through this together. This is, again, translated by Thich Nhat Hanh, and the 5 remembrances are: 1, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape
growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand.
So beautiful. Thank you for reading. And I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the text that's referred to there. Can you tell us anything about that, like where that text came from?
I really cannot.
I think that's the sayings of the Buddha, teachings of the Buddha. I mean, when I got into Buddhism, I was middle-aged. I was 35. And I just was blown away by how open everyone is about death, how open my teachers are. And we would say prayers every day in which we would say things like this, and that's the opposite of what people think about in our culture, in our Western culture. We just avoid the subject as much as until we can't avoid it anymore, or we're sick or something is happening to us or a loved one. But the idea is in Buddhism, and I think in Hinduism, the idea is not to get morbid, not to depress yourself every day and think, oh, I'm going to grow old and have ill health and I can't escape that. It's to see what's important now and to focus on your actions, to focus on how you're living your life. And because that's the only thing that you can take with you is your karma at the end of your life.
Which seems very much in agreement with what we've read about the law of one from channeling transcripts.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And with Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the things he would always say is, you want to die with a smile on your face. So, if you think about it and you do some preparation, and again, it's not out of being morbid, it's about the honesty of it and that preparation for it. Because I do believe that when we can be okay with the notion, and at that point in time, we can leave with a smile on our face, and it puts us into the right direction as you move on. So
what a beautiful way to think about it. And what a beautiful segue into our first passage to look at. Let's go ahead and take a look at a passage on planning your death. On February 8th, 1987, Quo was responding to a question from Jay, who asked, "Is it not true that before our incarnation into this life that we chose our own death, and it could be the case that we would use cancer or some other illness as the means of our death?" I am Quo. We might suggest, my brother, that there are correctnesses and incorrectnesses in the assumptions which you have made. We shall attempt to speak to this topic. It is true that those who are aware of the processes of incarnation and its purpose, due to a conscious discovery of this incarnative process during an incarnation, take a more complete role in the planning of the incarnation, which is to come before the incarnation. The framework for attempting certain lessons that will enrich an entity as a whole is determined, as are those services which might be shared as fruit of the effort of learning with others. There are many possibilities for each incarnation in these two general realms of endeavor, that of learning and that of serving. Because free will is paramount within the incarnation, and indeed before, the planning must take a general form with many potential specific aspects, be they events or entities, programmed, shall we say, as possibilities and even probabilities. Many are dependent upon other choices and agreements made between entities for various times and purposes. Thus, there is much that is fluid and flexible, shall we say, within any incarnation that will allow for the learning of the lessons and the offering of these services. That graduation, shall we say, from the incarnation that is called the death, in many cases is the subject of just such planning, which is to say, there is a variety of possibilities for each entity that may occur according to the completing of the overall plan for the incarnation in a more or less successful fashion. It can be said that the lesson shall continue for any entity within an incarnation until their weight grows too heavy, at which time the entity shall have planned for one means of bringing the incarnation to its culmination. This general means of ending the incarnation may be seen as a continuing effort to gain in the polarization in consciousness which has been chosen. Thus, when an entity is more successful, shall we say, in the overall plan, and has achieved much of that which was laid out before the incarnation, it may be that one or more potential death, as you call them, experiences are presented to the entity who, by its efficiency in continuing to utilize the catalyst, may yet continue within the incarnation by successfully using the catalyst, which could have brought about that termination of the incarnation called death. Really fascinating passage, and I remember when this was shared to me by our friend Ragnar. It was really helpful to me because, I did have concerns about death, about my own personal death, and to see some affirmation, shall we say, from our friends in the Confederation that it has been carefully planned pre-incarnatively. And while it might not be like specifically exactly down to the detail what we might be thinking of it right now, the general form of it has already been planned out in advance. And I just find that a super beautiful thing. Greg, did you have any thoughts on this passage and insofar as it might relate to your experiences in hospice care?
Oh boy. The part about planning makes me think of sitting with your soul family, and I don't know that this happens, but I have it in my head that it happens, that we sat around in a circle and said, okay, I'm going to do this, and then you be this person, and then you be this person, and then this will happen. And it's kind of astounding. Sometimes an astounding thing will happen. One of the more vivid things that happened to me as a chaplain, I was called to the emergency room, and there was a young woman, in her 20s, who had gotten caught in gang crossfire in one of the parks in Chicago. She was with her little baby. Well, I shouldn't say baby. This kid was 2 or 3 years old, jumping around the hospital room happily, because the mother, when she was shot, made a point of falling on that kid, and that saved the kid. And everybody in the room knew it, you know. And this kid didn't really understand what was going on, and just jumping up on the chair and saying hi to me. And I was just speechless. I was almost in tears, you know. But I just have a thought of that they worked that out, that the mother did this and the daughter did that, and then years later, what will the daughter think about the mother's act, you know?
Yeah, but to have a positive memory of it, as opposed to a core memory of being sad and traumatized.
Yeah.
I can see that as a beautiful thing, especially if, as you're saying, it was planned pre-incarnatively. Yeah. Peggy, any thoughts? Anything to add?
Several things come to mind on this one. So the whole passage of where it says when the culmination of this life becomes too heavy to continue on, and I'm paraphrasing, but you know, I just think of so many people who we've cared for, who I and my team have cared for, who, you know, we see that they are getting just physically and in their physical bodies, we see them getting weaker and weaker. And we know that they're getting closer and closer to death, but they are not ready. And they are deciding to continue with every treatment because the weight hasn't become so heavy for them yet. And so I just think, again, people, you know, they have their moment when they determine that. And I think even though we have in our incarnative plan, we know that this, you know, these are the steps that are going to take. I think we also kind of know that we're going to determine in that time frame when that weight becomes too heavy, and it's for no one else to determine. So that's the one thing I really learned to respect, is that when people say, hey, I'm not ready to give up, I'm not ready to say no to any more treatment, that being respectful of that is so important, because this is their journey and this is the journey that they've chosen. You know, I think for my mom, when we cared for her at the end of her life, she was 92. She had kind of a major heart issue. She was adamant that she was like ready, she was done. You know, she had been living with pretty severe arthritis. And, you know, she was the one, even though, again, she was not physically at a point where she was going to die tomorrow, but she was at that point where the weight had become too heavy. And this was her time to figure that out and to determine that she was ready to go. So I've seen a lot of that. And again, I think I have other instances where we all thought medically this person was dying because they had been on a ventilator for 14 days, couldn't get them off the ventilator. They weren't responding neurologically at all. And we had prepared the family, and the family had said, no, she, you know, never want to live with a tracheostomy, you know, a tube in the throat to breathe, never would want to live, you know, long-term in a nursing home. We were all ready to do a withdrawal of care the following day. We had met with the family, and this was during the COVID time. So family couldn't come in and visit her, which was just horrible for them. But they really wanted to do like a prayer session. So I arranged to have that taken care of, and they had a prayer session. And lo and behold, the next day, this woman starts moving, And so we put everything on hold and said, no, let's see what happens. And within a few days, she's awake. And so again, I think we have many potential points where we could call it quits. And for whatever reason, this woman decided, I think that she decided, I'm not ready. I have more to learn. And this was something maybe that she again had set up with her family pre-incarnatively. So, it's always just amazing to me to see how there are these times where people have the chance to leave the planet and they decide not to, and other times
sure.
where they want to and they do. So
yeah, and I think I want to interject at this point, just to let our viewers know that at last month's L&L Coming Home gathering, I attended a breakout session that was hosted by Greg and Peggy, where the topic was Death Cafe, and we had many of these same conversations. And that's why I'm having them on right now, because I heard so many beautiful, powerful things at that session that I really thought all of our viewers would benefit from hearing. So that is why we're here and why we're having this conversation. So I did want to note one, Death Cafe. It's a thing. Google it up and you will find many great platforms for talking about death. And Greg and Peggy can elaborate on that if they wish. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, as a follow-up to what we've just been talking about for the last several minutes, a little bit about letting the deceased person go when they have decided that it is time. Because I do remember one thing that you both spoke about that I thought was really important for our viewers to know is that you talked a fair bit about oftentimes when a person who is in hospice care decides that they do not want to eat anymore or take in liquids anymore, it is a common reflex for their family or loved ones to override that and say, for whatever reason, they think it's important to keep this person on feeding and breathing, and how that can be problematic or disservice to the wishes of the person who has decided it is their time to pass. So, Greg, do you mind if I ask you first to share a little bit about, kind of the same things that you talked about at North Bend, and Peggy to follow up on that as you wish?
Well, the thing that strikes me about, actually my father, he also knew when he was done. He didn't want to do any more treatment, and he actually had quite a peaceful death at home in his own bed and surrounded by us. But the thing that strikes me about this passage, it was where it says at the end about the means of ending the incarnation and about planning how your end will come, is that some people you could always tell in the hospital. I'm sure Peggy had encountered this more than I did. You could always tell when people were done with treatment. They didn't want to do it anymore. They were just tired of it, because the medical system can wear you down over weeks, months, years. It can keep you going, and it can just exhaust you, and you could tell when someone was done and they would die. And often people knew they were going to die. They could predict their death. Here's a story. Can I tell a story? A little story?
Yeah, please. Okay.
Yeah. We had a man was dropped off at the emergency room by his friend, and he came in and under his own power and talked to the nurse and sat there and said, I'm here to die. I'm going to die. And the nurse looked at him and said, well, you don't look like you're going to die. And he was examined by different doctors, and they determined, well, no, it doesn't look like you're going to die today. You have days to weeks. They had doctors, and advanced practice nurses, they will give you a range like that. It'll be weeks to months, or he was days to weeks. And but he was adamant about that. He thought, oh no, I'm going to be dead by the end of the week. Can I have can I have some watermelon? And this was December, and finding watermelon in Chicago, not easy. But I thought, hey, this is a dying man's last request. I got to do this. So I ran across the street to the supermarket, and I found a cup with some fruit in it, and some of it was watermelon. And it wasn't good watermelon, but I thought, well, this is the best I can do. So I brought him his watermelon. And our social worker also talked to him over the next couple of days. Oh, and he asked for some ice cream a few days later. And I got him an ice cream cone. And I remember seeing him sitting in the bed with his ice cream cone. He was kind of sleeping. He wasn't eating it because he didn't need to eat anything, frankly. And the next day when I came into work, he had passed. He had died that night. He lived 6 days, and he knew very well he was going to die. And that happened several times.
And that's funny that it's, his last requests were about food. And so, and yet he wasn't really eating it. I mean, I remember at my dad's death, he requested corned beef hash. We went and got him corned beef hash. He didn't eat a bit of it, and then he died that night. But so it's interesting that people do make those requests, even though they know they're dying, and even though their bodies, they don't really want the food. But to your point of nutrition and hydration at end of life, I think it's one of the things that families most struggle with, because they feel like they're starving their loved one, and they feel like that's giving up on them. And if the person who is dying has not made it extremely clear what their wishes are, then family can, step in and kind of override. But what we know is that at the end of life, our bodies don't need fluid, and they don't need food, and that it's actually a burden to the body. And that by putting too much fluid and food into a body as it's getting to the end of life, we actually are making it more uncomfortable. We're actually causing distress and pain, because we're adding fluid, which goes into the lungs. The heart can't pump as well to keep that fluid moving. So we end up causing people to get into respiratory distress that way, and to have a worse experience at end of life than is natural. I mean, I think all the indigenous cultures have a very clear understanding that, at the end of life, you lay down and you are quiet, and you don't eat and you don't drink. But it is, I would say, that was the hardest conversation to have with families, if the patient themselves had not given the family clear direction, because eating is it's our way of socializing, it's our way of showing love, it's our way of being. And so when that stops, that's the first sure sign. But it's so interesting to know that most people don't know that. I mean, even my mom at her deathbed, she was, I think I told this story, was that she was ready to die, but she was having a great time. I mean, she was talking to people on the phone. We were all waiting on her. She was, whatever she wanted to eat or drink, we were making for her. And then when this went on for a couple weeks, she started getting pissed at God, because why isn't God taking me? I don't understand. I have been, a good person all my life. And, I mean, she was just really mad one day, and I'm listening to her, and I said, well, Mom, at the end of our lives, we don't keep eating and we don't keep drinking. And she said to me, so what am I supposed to do? Starve myself? I said, well, no, it's not really starving yourself, but that's what our bodies say at the end of life. So, I had this book that I gave her to read because mentally she was with it up to, kind of like the last week. And she read the book and then she was like, oh, I got it. And so that's when she told us all, okay, I'm not going to eat anymore. I don't want to drink a lot. I want to start being more quiet. And then within probably about 7-10 days, she had passed. But she had no clue. She had no clue what it was to, what the natural process of dying entails. So it's not uncommon. And, it was beautiful that we could have that conversation. And, I'm glad that she definitely chose her death. So.
Such a beautiful story. And I'm going to give you a tissue alert right now because that is such a beautiful story. And I was getting emotional.
Yeah. I hear you. It, was it was an emotional time, and I'm glad, I'm glad she figured it out, and I'm glad she made these decisions.
Yeah. And again, that's really why I wanted to have you on today, so that folks know, if you watching this on video are indeed caring for someone who may appear to be near the end of the incarnation, then lesson for one person to let the family know what their wishes are, and another for the family to realize that when that person says it's time to go.
Ooh, segue alert.
Mm-hmm.
Segue alert. Can we segue?
Yeah.
You said about letting the family know. Okay, so this quote is called Planning Your Death. So I have to give a commercial for what I used to do as a chaplain, which is to go around filling out a particular form with patients called the Power of Attorney for Healthcare. That was actually one of my main jobs, along with praying and giving spiritual support. So as far as planning your death in this culture, it is important to choose someone who you feel can be a decision maker. If you can't make this, you can make decisions up on your own as long as you are able and conscious. But just in case down the road, if you can't make decisions, who do you want to be your decision maker? And you can split that between 2 or 3 children or other trusted individuals. So that's an important part of planning for your death, along with a lot of other things I think we'll talk about later about more emotional, financial things too. But
but that was a very timely place to mention that, as well as any other forms. I'm embarrassed to say I did not think of that, but yes, of course, there are forms that you can fill out with your doctor or get notarized by a notary to let your family and perhaps first aid responders know specifically what sort of interventions you do want, what sort of interventions you do not want if you are found unconscious.
Yeah, and they're called advance directives. You can go onto most of the state websites and find a form for advance directives that can be filled out for your state. And again, it is identifying a person who would be your spokesperson, but it'll also ask questions like, do you want to live long-term on a ventilator? Do you want hydration and nutrition at the, if you have a terminal illness or an incurable illness? I mean, again, these are all really great questions to review and go over with someone prior to them getting to that point where they can't tell you their decisions. Because from my experience, the families who had the discussions beforehand were so much more ready and comfortable when the time came than the families who never talked about it. Because then they were in question about am I doing what mom wants? Am I not? I don't know. I don't want to feel like I've killed her. I mean, there's all this emotion that comes up. And so
Right.
when you have that done beforehand and that person has told you what it is they want and don't want, it makes it so much easier. It is we call them, I always call them, it's a present that you can give it's a gift that you give to your family by doing it. So.
Really great way to look at it. Yeah, much appreciated. And indeed, we could spend the next 2 hours talking without ever changing the slides, but we do, as you know, have a number of passages wanted to look at on different aspects of this. So if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and move forward, and let's take a look at a couple passages on aging and infirmity. On May 26, 2018, Quo said, "The process of which you call aging within your third density illusion is a product of the persistent processing of catalyst in order to move along the line of light, the spiritual spiraling light that moves in accordance with unity to the one creator. The processing of catalyst over a period of what you call time begins to take its toll upon the mind-body-spirit complex. This toll is that of wearing, shall we say, of a certain friction that is created when catalyst is not completely processed. This causes a kind of aging that is represented in your physical vehicle, as you are aware, through its loss of some flexibility, some strength, some ability to recuperate from difficulties, be they physical illness, emotional, or mental. The mind itself also suffering in some fashion from the catalyst, which has not been well processed and which has taken its toll also upon the mind, so that there are some difficulties, as you are aware, in the memory. We also would suggest that oftentimes a soul will program into an incarnation the premature onset of what you would call the aging process, so that this may be used as a motivation tool to aid the soul's progress. For most entities, however, the process of aging is that which is a reminder to the mind that the incarnation has a set length, and that if there is future progress to be made, it is well that it be attended to as soon as possible, for the time grows short. I'm really fascinated how in this passage and other passages we've seen or will see, it really comes down to processing catalysts. That really is kind of the key to planning out your incarnation as well as the end of your incarnation, that you had lessons that you came here to learn, and that insofar as that is concerned, you will be facing catalyst every day, every moment to process to help you learn those lessons. And that when you've kind of reached the end, the limit of that, then your body also has built-in processes for bringing the incarnation to end through aging, not just through death. I just find that super fascinating. Peggy, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Well, I think what's really interesting is there's a lot of emphasis right now, particularly in some of the alternative health areas, about the importance of processing traumas and our pain and our catalysts in relation to health, and how connected illness is to those traumas. So for me, this passage brings that up a lot, that these holistic approaches are really, emphasizing this importance of dealing with the traumas. And the other thing I would say is that these families, the families who really sit through and like kind of work through their traumas, particularly at end of life, it's always really fascinating, because they really do understand, okay, I've got to take care of this stuff now. And we would encourage people, if you got anything, you need to take care of it now. And it would be really interesting sometimes how the patients and the families would come together to deal with some of their long-standing pain that had been going on for years and years. You had it.
What a fascinating thing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had not even made that connection before, but I do certainly remember when Ross said something to the effect that trauma is such an important part of the catalyst that so many have pre-programmed. So never thought of that in this context. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Greg, did you have anything to add?
Two things occur to me. I'll be brief. Thing number one is, I think everybody knows about friction. Everybody in the hospital, everybody who's seeing their doctor for years and dealing with this or that ache or pain or illness. I mean, I'm getting to be one of those. I'm in that age range. But the hard thing for me as a chaplain was when someone would say to me, "Why is this happening to me? I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I was a good person. I drove safely. Why do I have this cancer all over me? Why is this happening?" And man, that was a hard one. The only thing I could think of was the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the first of which is suffering, the truth of suffering. Life, I wouldn't say life is suffering, but suffering is pervasive. And it is certainly associated with this body. From the moment you're born, something is happening to your body. It's changing and it's susceptible to all kinds of little injuries and pricks and scratches and worse. And so that's kind of the nature of having a body. And I would say that to people, and I was kind of okay. That kind of, I don't know. It's something.
Did you ever share your perspective from the law of one with folks in that situation? And that looking at that person's situation from your perspective might help? Or was that just something you wouldn't really do if they had never asked about it?
See, the hard thing, you bring up an interesting point. I was a Buddhist chaplain. I was a law of one believer, and I couldn't talk about that to anyone because I had to meet people where they are, and 99% of the people I encountered they were either Christian, a variety of Christian or monotheistic religion, or no religion at all. But no religion at all is getting to be spiritual, but not religious. Is getting to be one of the most popular designations among.
Sure. No, that all makes perfect sense. And I was only asking because in the context of someone who was frustrated because they couldn't understand why they had that illness, even though they never smoked and so on and so on. This is something that could feasibly give them an answer that they had never considered before.
I couldn't go to them and say, "You designed this catalyst for yourself when you were talking to your guardian, life between lives, Michael Newton," and they'd be like,
"Well, just saying that from my perspective," and again, that's not necessarily the right perspective from you.
They would have thrown me out of the room as fast as possible. But
yeah, there is that too.
But the important thing to me is that I had that framework. I had that framework that made sense to me. Mm-hmm. I have a framework, not only the Buddhist framework, but the law of one framework. And that helped me so much in being calm, in being able to listen, in being open, in kind of being accepting even of terrible things I would see happening to people, especially in the emergency room. I could take a deep breath and think to myself, and then I could be there for them. Mm-hmm. So it was tremendously helpful as far as background, but I had to keep it in my head.
Yeah. But I would also say though that I didn't tell anybody, I didn't explain to anybody law of one, but it did give me the tools to say, well, let's talk a little bit about what are your beliefs about this life and the next life, and do you think that God loves you, and do you think that you're going to be one with God? And most people would say yes, they thought God loved them, and that yes, they were going to be one with God. So it really was just a way to, help them to see that they are, they are one with the Creator. They are one with the next in the next life. So
it's a perspective to offer, and I did want to reassure our viewers that I'm not saying you should go out and like knock on doors and proselytize for the law of one. I'm just saying, especially if you're in a position as a chaplain where that would be considered like, yeah, that's against policies. But I mean, just for a family member and for someone who's in a position where they could possibly offer a way of looking things that the person who's in that last stages of their life might actually appreciate hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was always surprised actually at the number of people out there who they are really thinking that maybe this play, I mean, I remember one guy saying to me, and I was just shocked because I would have never thought this would come from this guy's mouth, but he said, I think this is all just an illusion anyway. And, so there are people out there who they get it. They may not have the framework that,
Right.
But they're seeing it as that there is something bigger than us here. So, so it was always amazing. I was always a bit amazed at some of the spirituality of folks.
Yeah, and maybe that was that one last thing that they had the opportunity in this incarnation to do, to gain that understanding before they leave. I had another passage that I wanted to look at specifically about Alzheimer's. Either of you have anything you wanted to share about this passage before I change screens and look at something else?
Just I would say with Alzheimer's, it's Alzheimer's and dementia is just so pervasive.
Right.
And it's one of the most difficult diseases for families and caregivers because people can last for years and years and years and years. And it is wearing on the soul of not only, the person who has Alzheimer's. I loved this passage actually.
Because let's go ahead, look at that passage. Let's read it through together and we can talk about it. So yes, as you mentioned, there are so many people who I imagine could relate to this experience. Thought they might find comfort in these words.
Yeah.
This was from October 16th, 2010. This is going to be on 2 slides. Quo said, in terms of the Alzheimer's disease, so-called, it occurs when an entity has learned all that it can learn, has endured all that it can endure, when it is at that level at which nothing more can be done in the incarnation, and the healing will need to take place at the metaphysical level after the entity has healed into larger life. And that condition, that which has been lost, is restored. The surface personality returns to the soul stream with its suffering and its pain, and there is ample energy available to heal the incarnation. It is a very helpful thing to heal the incarnation during the incarnation so that one approaches one's deathbed ready to sing hallelujah, 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 as did the one known as Yeats. But it is not necessary, for that which is not healed in the lifetime shall be healed after the lifetime and before the next experience is chosen. So when an entity is exhausted and has not been able to heal its own incarnation, there is the blessedness of the forgetting. Now, sometimes it is unfortunately so that the fog that descends does not remove all that is unhappy, but the basic reason for the gradual release of memory is that the entity involved can no longer process catalyst effectively. The use of this for the caretaker can be thought of under the basic spiritual principle of being of service to others rather than the self. Many are the entities who choose to put parents or relatives, those for whom they have become responsible, in a care facility and allow someone else to change the diapers, tend to the wandering mind, and so forth. But for those who choose to stay present and attentive to a need within their family, it is a great blessing to be able to share love for that entity which has shared so much love with you, however imperfectly that love was shared. The intent is almost always there within the parent to love and care for the young one, and in the fullness of time, that pattern is repeated and balanced as the young one cares for the failing parent. Families are a wonderful source of service to others' opportunities. Certainly there are times when caring for one whose mind is failing seems too much to bear, and we encourage the one known as A and all of those that are in this position to honor the self at those times and release responsibility so that the self may be healed in order to heal, restored in order to restore, consoled in order to console. And if the one who restores and heals and loves the self is the self, then so be it, for you are capable of healing, loving, and restoring yourself. You are the creator, and you may choose the manner of your creation. Again, such a beautiful passage that I hope that if there is a viewer who is in the situation of looking like there's Alzheimer's, dementia in your future, or a family member who's in the position of caring for one who is in that situation, I hope you find some comfort and consolation and inspiration in these words, because I certainly do myself.
Yeah.
Greg, Peggy, I know you were already talking a little bit about Alzheimer's after having read through this passage. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, again, for the family members who have agreed pre-incarnatively to take on this task, oh my gosh, I bow to their service, because this is one of the most difficult illnesses. Some of these folks live for 10 plus years. And it is one of those where if no one had the conversation with the person who has Alzheimer's prior to them becoming non-decisional, this is where nutrition and hydration can become a really big issue. Because again, when someone cares for someone for that length of time, the idea of it becomes part of their being, that being that caretaker of this person has become part of their identity. And so it makes it very difficult to make the decisions about stopping hydration or stopping feeding and or not doing those things to begin with. So this is, and we see more and more and more of this. And this was one of the illnesses that I just found so fascinating with families and with caregivers, because.
So what words of advice might you offer someone who has been caretaking for someone for more than a short length of time with Alzheimer's and is feeling a lot of strain and difficulty?
Again, I'm very much of, if you can take care of them, it's always better for the person to be cared for by family. I think they absolutely get better care, but there does come a point where if it is causing you physical illness, if it's causing you emotional distress, reaching out and getting help and or considering a place for this person, the person with Alzheimer's, your loved one with Alzheimer's, to go and be cared for, where you can go and be the visitor rather than the caregiver, is absolutely a viable alternative, and a good one, because at some point you do want to be the daughter. You don't necessarily, I want to be the daughter. I don't necessarily want to be the caregiver anymore. I want to be able to sit with this person and let other people do the caring so that I can just be present with that person at these ends of life. And I would say for anybody who gets a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and or dementia, and you still have capacity, that is really the time to really address some of the issues of how much do you want done? What do you want done? Do you want to live with these kind of things? Feeding tubes, resuscitation, those type of things. I just really encourage that having those conversations as a family is so important.
Especially since it is such a uncomfortable, if not taboo subject for so many people to talk about, all the more reason to break that barrier and
Mm-hmm.
have those conversations. Yeah,
Yeah.
much appreciate that. Greg, anything to add?
Um, Early in my I love this quote because it touches on many important things and it does pay tribute to caregivers. I saw so many examples of people with few resources who cared for disabled loved ones for years and years and decades. Um, for instance, there was a kid who was born with a disease with about 10 or 12 letters, which I can't remember the name because it's so complicated, but he could not grow. He stopped growing at about, I don't know, age 10, 8 or 10. So he was about 3 feet tall and he was age 43. And his sister was his caregiver. Oh, he couldn't speak, by the way. He could only tap. He had a funny, amazing and funny communication by tapping, and only the sister knew what he meant when he tapped on her leg or on the bed or something like that. It was astounding, but she never missed a doctor's appointment. Anyway, long story short, she had to bring him to the hospital. He had some respiratory thing going on and fever, and the doctors would meet with the sister and noticed that she was coughing and looked at her, and they could just tell she needed to get checked out. And so she was off getting a test for, I mean, we all really had to convince her to get checked out. Turned out she had cancer. She was at a test when he died. I got a call that he died. And I went up to the room, and all the nurses were beside themselves. They were just because it looked like a little kid had died in the bed. It hardly made a lump in the bed, you know. And I said a prayer, and it was. Then I had to tell the sister who was across the hall that he had died, and that was awful. But what am I? So this just tells me about the devotion of caregivers and about how caregivers need to take care of themselves or they could get sick too.
Yeah.
So she became the next one who would come to the hospital regularly, and I would visit her as she was getting her cancer treatments.
Yeah, these chronic illnesses take such a toll on families.
What a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, I would have loved to go for another hour and just go for the whole long story because I'm sure there was so much more to it that you didn't share. Do you have, just out of curiosity, just in looking back on, what you did share with us from a law of one perspective, what's your take on that? How do you read that? What I can only assume was a pre-incarnative arrangement.
Oh, yes. The mother, when the mother died, before she died, she told the sister to take care of him, to take care of her brother. So that became her kind of her mission. To me, it's about devotion. It's about having a mission, having a purpose. This was her purpose in life. She would take him to the barber shop. People would say, "Oh, how's your kid? Look at that. How's your kid doing?" And she'd go, "Well, that's my brother."
It's kind of about the honor of keeping a promise too.
Yes.
That's what I'm seeing from this as well. Yeah, it was clearly something that they had arranged before, and it would appear that soon after the brother passed, the sister knew that it was about time.
And then
they had both completed their missions and their contracts.
Yeah, and then the next sister became her caregiver, the next in line.
Wow.
Yeah,
that is
it was amazing.
Wow.
And so the commitment and the caring, like it says here, families are a wonderful source of service to others' opportunities. That is true. Families can also be the source of a lot of other things, unfortunately. But that's the place to start with compassion. Start at home. Start with your family if you can.
Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough for folks who are perhaps new to the law of one that the word unique appears countless times in channeling transcripts where the entities known as Ra and Quo have really emphasized time and time again that each soul is unique, each spiritual journey is unique, and whatever works for one entity does not necessarily work for anyone or everyone else. And vice versa, what seems to work for others or everyone else does not necessarily work for you. So I hope you who are watching this on video in the near or distant future remember that anything that's been said here so far might work for you, but it might not necessarily, and don't need to feel obligated, beholden to anything.
Yeah, I think that it's very difficult for these families to care for their loved ones at home. People have to work, that you got to survive. I mean, you know, these types of scenarios, you know, I mean, I'm sure they were living in a certain element of poverty because of this, you know.
Oh, sure.
And
Very
so
much.
that's always the struggle for many of these families, is they would love to care for their loved one at home, but feasibly they can't.
And they would love to be able to afford to put them into a care facility too, and might not be able to do that.
Exactly, right.
Right, but that becomes their job, and that helps. That actually, in a way, helps them to, with the catalyst, you know, to do service, to do a level of service that few are even called upon to constitute.
Well, it reminds me of how important forgiveness of self is to the loved one, how easy it would be for someone to have a really hard time feeling like they failed and what they felt they were supposed to do with an elder and not being able to forgive themselves for it. And man, I hope if you are watching this on video that you treat yourself with the same love and compassion that you probably would extend to someone else.
Yes.
Yeah, you're doing God's work, you know, as a caregiver. That is the best thing you can do, really.
And knowing that, you know, even if there's so many levels of caregiver, right? I mean, just because you can't take care of someone at home doesn't mean you're not a good caregiver. If you're going and you're visiting and you're doing the other things that you can do in that time frame, and honestly, you know, even if you can't do that because it's so difficult, then that's okay too. You know, I mean,
maybe you had a really abusive parent who really hurt you, and you really just can't find yourself to be a caretaker at all for someone who hurt you so badly. I hope you would forgive yourself for that and just know that doing the inner work of finding some sort of peace and forgiveness within, that's more than enough.
Yeah.
Can I mention something just popped in my head real brief? Sometimes when people are at end of life, their personality will change, and someone who was kind and patient and funny and loving will seem like a different person. Sometimes, not all the time. Once in a while. I remember one guy in particular who was just irritable and mad and didn't want to be there and yelling at his kids, and they're going, what are you yelling at me for? And I tried to tell him that's the illness talking. That's not your father talking. That's the illness. So it's just a twist on what you were saying.
Yeah, so beautiful. So no, I really, really appreciate it. Like I said, that was the whole point for having you two on, so that you could share stories like this. And warning to our viewers, this will probably be a longer than normal episode, and don't feel like you have to sit and watch the whole thing or listen to it in one sitting. Pause it whenever you need to, put it in your watch later list if you're on YouTube, and continue after that. But yeah, I have this strange feeling in my heart that everything that the two of you have shared so far is really going to help others, and cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. I did want to go ahead and look at another passage on another subject. Did either of you have anything you wanted to add on this subject before we change?
I don't think so.
No, that's all for me.
Sounds good. Well, let's take a look at a passage on the death experience. On November 19th, 2000, Quo said, "When it is time to release the flesh, the blood, the time, and the space, the question is what survives. And because this particular instrument has had an experience where it died and then came back to life after 30 seconds of death, this instrument can say from sheer experience, consciousness survives. By this, we mean that at or close to the physical death, the consciousness becomes aware that the physical body is becoming unviable. It has been linked throughout life to the physical body through what this instrument has called the silver cord. Consider this simply as that which tethers the soul or the spirit to a particular body. Now, at or close to physical death, this silver cord simply lets go. It may not immediately leave the body, especially if it is interested to see what may happen. Many are the spirits that choose to remain very close to the physical body until such time as all of those within that family, shall we say, have had the opportunity to express their grief and have some sort of farewell service. Often, the honored guest at a funeral is the deceased, for it simply cannot leave until it sees what everyone is wearing, how everyone is feeling, if everyone is all right. From the most frivolous concern there is, that entire constellation or universe of feelings for these people that have been so dear and so loving for so long and have had so much shared history. Such a beautiful expression here, and I love the confirmation of what we have seen or heard from other sources, that when that death experience happens, often the spirit likes to stick around for a little while, see how they are being remembered by those who remain, and make sure that those who they love dearly, that everything's going to be okay before they are ready to move on. I just find that such a beautiful and inspiring thing. Greg, did you have any thoughts on any of that or anything from this passage?
So here we hear about a near-death experience. And this is actually something that I would mention. I wouldn't mention my Buddhist beliefs to people who weren't, I didn't know if they would be receptive to that, but I might mention NDEs because they can be a source of great comfort to everyone, no matter what their spiritual beliefs, or if they don't have any spiritual beliefs. They're fascinating, and I did mention that on occasion to people, and
Yeah.
I see that.
And it's their choice whether they want to ask anything further or not.
Yeah. And a lot of people know about it already, actually. So we could have a nice conversation about NDEs we have been familiar with.
Nice. Peggy, anything to add?
Well, I would say also that we certainly have had experiences, and this is a little bit out of this, but so many times, and I can even think with my oldest sister when she was dying, that she really needed to hear from all of us that we were all going to be okay, and that everything was in order, and she did what she was supposed to do. And because she lingered and lingered and lingered, and we couldn't figure out exactly why she was lingering. And then we had gotten a message to say, oh, she needs to hear from all of you that everything is okay, and that it's okay for her to go. You guys are all going to be fine. You all have resolved any issues. And so I think sometimes, and we see that a lot with patients, where they're waiting for like one person to come, and then once that person comes, they're able to release and let go. And so I think, even though this is a little different than this answer, it still feels like it is that experience of, we're holding that silver cord until until this event happens, and then it's okay to release it. So I really do encourage that if there's anything that needs to be resolved, that then is the time to do that, so that the person who is dying can release the cord and move on. And I do, oftentimes we would have people who would say, oh, I feel their energy in the room. Or even like the doc that I work with, he would often get, he was extremely connected spiritually, and he would often get the sensation of, oh, this person has left, and even, he was out of the building, but would still get that, that connection. So it is very interesting. And it was almost in one scenario, I remember him saying, I felt like that patient was coming to me as almost a thank you for the time he had spent with his family. So I do, this is definitely.
Yeah. So beautiful. I seem to remember you're also noting at that breakout group where we had similar conversations that, it's not unusual for those folks who are really, really close to the death experience for those who are sitting with them to feel like they're just kind of looking through them. And they might even be seeming to be talking, having conversations with some other entity who is otherwise invisible to the
or seeing a party happening up there.
That was one thing with my mom. She was seeing people on the other side. Don't exactly know who she was seeing, but she was having conversation with them. And again, my mom, I believe, is someone who is, and I've been told she and I are in the same soul family, and that we have traveled many times together. And so at one point she shouted for me and she asked me, Peg, are you here or are you there? And I thought, oh, wow, we've been together.
Doesn't know.
She doesn't know. She's in between, and oh gosh, tell me, Mom, which place?
Well, you are such an angelic being. I could see cause for confusion there.
But that was funny. But then when I said to her, I don't know, Mom, where am I? And she's like, oh, never mind.
You don't know either?
Damn.
We're both fucked.
She's not letting me in on it. So, but so again, there are many times where people are in between. They're in between two worlds. So many times where they are seeing people over our shoulders, and you can tell that they're seeing something. And don't you see that man at the end of the bed? And so it's very.
Has anybody seen anything bad, like scary, as in they're seeing something that you can't see that's actually fearful, traumatizing?
I did not. I don't ever recall anybody saying to me that they were seeing something that was really scary.
No.
That's a beautiful thing to know, for sure.
Yeah. People more often will see relatives who have died. And I remember a lady said, I was just sitting talking to my sister, and I was told later, the sister died years ago.
Yeah.
But that's how they knew she was getting close to the death stage.
Yeah.
And that is not uncommon for someone in the dying stage to start seeing people coming that they recognize and love. I don't remember negative.
I do have, I had a friend who passed away, and she had been through a very difficult relationship with her husband. He had passed, and she started seeing him at the end of her life. And she was like, no, you go away. I don't want to see you. So, I suppose that was not a pleasant sight for her. That was
my ex-wife is here.
Wow.
That's so funny. There are so many takeaway lessons I would imagine viewers have already picked up from here. And I really just feel like highlighting something that you both mentioned a while ago that I think that's a good takeaway lesson, that if you know of a parent or person who seems to be and they're ready to go, to reassure them, to tell them that we're going to be okay. It's okay. You can go if you want. I would think that would be a really reassuring thing for everyone involved.
Everyone,
Yes.
absolutely. I would, a lot of times for patients, just saying to them, because we also think hearing is probably the last sense that people have. So I would always encourage families, keep talking to them, say what you need to say. And if they didn't have family around, I would just always say to them, God loves you. You know, you're going to a good place. You know, God loves you. And just to offer that reassurance for people who didn't have anybody. Those were the most difficult, you know, the folks who just didn't have anybody.
I can imagine. Yeah. Which is actually a great segue into the next topic and next passage I wanted to look at. Did either of you have anything you wanted to add on this slide, this passage, before we change?
Just that as a chaplain, I never felt quite so valuable as when after someone died, I would call everyone around the bed and we would stand in a circle or maybe holding hands and we would say a prayer. And you did have the sense that the person who died was still there. And I'm not one to see things. I never really seen lights or anything like that, but I feel this shivering in my head, and I would feel that frequently. I feel that at channelings, actually. I feel that I feel the entity, and I felt the recently deceased person still there. Just
That's because you're bald, Greg. Speaking as one bald man to another, I felt those chills on my head before. It's just because I wasn't wearing it.
That's right.
Just kidding, of course. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for thinking that was funny too. If it's okay with you guys, yeah, I would like to move ahead and take a look at a passage on what our friends in the Confederation have referred to as steps of light. On April 16th, 2000, the entity known as Quo said, and this has been edited for brevity, picture, if you will, a walk that is long and beautiful and seems to be completely a walkway filled with light. On either side of this walkway are presences that are extremely loving and nurturing and that guard each and every spirit that walks this path of light. Picture then, if you will, a light whose very nature changes, becoming more dense, more bright, and in ways hard to describe, more challenging. It is as though elements have been added to this light as you move along this walk. The reason for this is that the nature of light changes by quanta. A photon within your density is not as complex as a photon within fourth density, which is not as complex as the photon in fifth density, and so forth. When you are walking steps of light, you're walking to find your most comfortable and attractive place to be. You are looking for your new home. When an entity is able to walk the steps of light of graduation into fourth density and feel comfortable there, one is able to move into fourth density for the next experience. And this is true in a continuing way. If an entity is able to enjoy and use the light of fifth density or sixth density, the entity may indeed move back into that home vibration. However, it is first necessary to rediscover that deep self within this incarnation, which you now experience to the extent that you are able to recapitulate that choice and the decisions that lead to being able to tolerate the light that is offered to those whose thoughts are more than 51% for other entities and how to serve them. It's a beautiful image that is said many, many times. If you go to the search engine at L&L Research and just do an exact word search for steps of light, you'll see that this has been talked about many times. I just tried to find one passage that seems to sum it up best. But yeah, I think it's a really beautiful corollary to what maybe some have described as the tunnel of light that many see when they have near-death experiences. But in this case, it's a little bit different insofar as you are actually trying to go as far as you can into the light in order to determine where, in fact, you are going to go after this incarnation. Greg, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
First, we provide people with a comic relief by
This
showing
is who
our
I
dog.
want to see along the path.
Along the steps of light.
That's right.
We would like our dog.
Right. We want this little corgi to be there. Sorry, but I got to feed her. So
I do want dogs to be in the next density, wherever that is.
Me
Otherwise,
too.
what's the point? Yeah.
Yeah, it's her dinner time. You know, the thing that strikes me is that in Tibetan Buddhism, there is a great contrast between this this beautiful image walking the steps of light. Buddhists, the more you get into Tibetan Buddhism, you get more and more details, and they are very good at describing how the death process involves the 5 elements. There are 5 elements in the world: air, earth, fire, water, and space. That's the 5th. And in the death process, each of these dissolves in turn. And you might see this as a flickering light, like a candle light, or you might see a mirage. You might start to see things, and you might see red, and then you might see white first, and then red, and then black. Black is called black near attainment, which means you've nearly attained your goal, and it's scary. It can be scary because it can feel like you're disoriented. I remember actually Peggy's mom saying that she was falling. She felt like she was falling. And I thought, oh, maybe it's like the black stage. But then you work through to the light. You work through to the clear light. Your goal is to go into the clear light. And not only that, but if you're, depending on your level of practice, you can envision yourself as a deity, and you arise in the light and saying, I am that, I am that. You feel joy, you feel space, and it's much more involved in Buddhism, but it's not that different. It goes to the same place. It goes to the light. And the farther you can go, you can become enlightened.
Yeah, always nice when we see overlaps between the law of one and other traditional teachings from the East, from the West, from indigenous cultures, from different cultures, and so on. So much appreciate your sharing that. Peggy, anything wanted to add on this thought on this subject?
I guess with this one in particular, it brings to me a memory of a patient who she had started having dreams prior to actually being at the on her deathbed, but she was having these premonitions of walking these pathways, but they were kind of clouds, and they were these beautiful buildings and things that she was walking through. And this one kind of brought up that memory for me, because I was always a bit amazed at how, and it was so comforting for her. These dreams, these premonitions that she was getting, they just brought her such great comfort and acceptance that, okay, this is good, I'm ready. So for me, that's what this one brought up, was that reminder that we often do, we get visions, and don't dismiss them, they are beautiful. So, and they can be helpful. And this is what I want for myself, God darn it. I want to walk these beautiful halls with these beautiful lights.
Yeah, indeed. And really, am reminded of how many folks in the Law of One community are concerned about this as well, especially if they are concerned about whether or not they will graduate from third density to fourth density. And
Sure.
I think there is an seemingly inevitable fear that when they walk those steps of light, that they will not end up where they wanted to be, whether it's fourth density for the first time or returning to fifth or sixth density if they came here as wanderers. And I think that is something that I find very comforting and reassuring in that first paragraph, where they're really just saying that it's up to you. I mean, you choose how far you want to go, and you're going to go as far as the light feels comfortable to you. And at the point where the light no longer feels comfortable to you, then we're going to backtrack. And again, it's easy to feel like, well, I'm going to be disappointed if the lights come back on and I'm still in third density. But I think the key here to remember is that you're choosing for yourself. Right. And you're going to choose the place that feels like home to you, feels like as much love as you can contain. And wherever that is, who gives a fuck? It's going to be what feels like heaven to you. So
yeah, exactly. And I think that for me is the other piece about being able to die with a smile on your face. Because if we can leave with some happiness, I think that walks us farther with the light. So, I mean, that's just my take on it, but.
Yeah, and it cannot be emphasized enough that it seems to be that it's all good. There's no like hell options here. There's no like bad negative alternatives. Wherever you were theologically, theistically, or atheistically before this, it's going to feel like a good positive experience. And that's reassuring, unless you've grown up with the whole idea of heaven and hell hanging over you. Yeah. And that's somebody else's catalyst to work through, I guess, for sure. Did either of you have any other thoughts you wanted to share on this before we take a look at some passages on what happens after the steps of light?
When in doubt, say a prayer. I think this is where prayer might be appropriate, especially if people are dying and they're nervous or they're afraid. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to get where they want to go. Say a prayer with them. Just keep saying the same thing over and over again.
Is there a prayer you would use for someone who has identified as atheist or agnostic?
Wow. I'd have to make it up. I'd have to say something.
You've never been in that situation before?
No, that's interesting. I'd say, Spirit, guide me to the light. Surround me with your love. Surround me with the light. I just keep saying that over and over again, because for a Christian, you could say, Hail Mary, full of grace, over and over. Just that line. You don't have to say anything else. For a Buddhist, you might pray to Amitabha, because a lot of Buddhists around the world, they pray to Lord Amitabha to take them up to the Pure Land, and that's Buddha's promise, and they believe that. But so many people have this innate belief that their mind needs to be calm at the time of death. They need to be calm, and so you can help them. You can help them whether they're religious or not, and say what means something to you, like I just said.
And I think for an atheist or agnostic, just focusing on love. I mean, that is, we're all walking with that, right? Or that is hopefully where we all want to go. And that has nothing to do with religion. It has, really staying within the love of self, the love of others, the love of these people who are surrounding you, and just focusing on that piece of it for those folks, I think is kind of the key. We don't, I would get a few people who had no religious, not the majority by any means.
So you could do that Hono, right? I'm not saying that correctly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But you could say that. You could say, thank you. I forgive you. Please forgive me. I love you. You could just say that over and over again, and that will help people, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What a great way. Yeah, for sure, if they still have unresolved issues.
Yeah.
I know sometimes when we have friends over or something, or we're saying grace before a meal, and we know that the people around the table are not particularly of the inclination to do that, I'll just say, sometimes want to offer thanks, and I'm sending this out to the universe. Just want to offer thanks for this meal and the entities who gave their lives in conscience for it. And I suppose could do a similar thing for end of a life, just saying expressions of love and gratitude, sending that out to the universe.
Very much so. Yeah.
I did have another passage I wanted to look at on post-incarnation review. Anything you guys want to add before we change subjects?
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Ready.
Well, let's take a look at a passage on post-incarnation review. This is going to be 2 slides, I believe, and this was from November 19th, 2000, where Quo said, if it is an incarnation pause between 2 incarnations in third density, the next step is what this instrument would call the review of the incarnation. In other words, there will be someone who comes to greet, welcome, and guide that consciousness which has just moved into that metaphysical time-space, which is the environment for the light body, which spirits have between incarnations. That guide may be a loved one close to the birth family. It may be a close friend. It may be a beloved entity such as Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or a favorite saint. It will be that entity which the spirit most feels comfortable with. And with that help, the consciousness is taken to a comfortable place where she may watch what you could think of as a movie or a book with many pictures. For truly, freed of the confines of time and space, the need for healing before further work is undertaken, and then assessing what might be the goals of the next incarnation. Coming into this consideration are the relationships that have been experienced in the last incarnation and how they fell out as to balancing energies between 2 people. Other issues include what lessons might have been planned for the past incarnation and how those lessons were learned, and what service was planned for that incarnation and how that went. There is no judgment involved in this review. There is no blame assigned if those things that were hoped to be accomplished were not. It is simply an evaluation process. After this initial process, if there has been healing that has been needed, then that will take place. In the inner planes of this planet, which each experiences between incarnations and third density, the environment is pretty much up to the consciousness that dwells within the inner planes and has experiences to undergo. For some spirits, healing will take place in what they conceive of as a hospital. Others will create for themselves a third density life with a job and so forth, and will have their healing done in a familiar environment of this kind. This healing process is very much under the free choice of the spirit that is undergoing the healing. For you see, each of you between incarnations has no veil of forgetting and is totally aware that he is part of the Creator. He is loved by the Creator and he is loved. Consequently, there is a gentleness and a charity in the way that the self talks to the self between incarnations that you do not experience in the sometimes harsh criticisms that each levels at herself within incarnation. Ultimately, when the consciousness feels that it is healed and that it is ready to take up further learning and further service within third density, it moves into that portion of the inner planes where souls are being readied for incarnation. And again, with the aid of the higher self and any guides which the consciousness deems helpful, a plan for incarnation is created. The main lessons to be learned are set into place. The main relationships which the consciousness hopes to pursue are discussed with those other souls and spirits, and agreements are made. And choices are made as to what shall be placed into the personality shell in terms of talents and gifts to share within incarnation, and the process begins again. Really, really beautiful, long passage with so many different things to unpack. And I know there's 2 things that come to mind. First, when I read through this. First is, as they're saying in that first paragraph here, who the fuck would want to go back to a job in an office after their incarnation? Jesus Christ, I would think that's the last thing I want to see after incarnation. That I gotta go back to fucking work? Holy shit, I thought I was done with that. I just thought that was a really funny thing to run across in this passage.
I agree.
And then second thing that comes to mind, of course, is, as I'm guessing many folks watching this on video would be thinking that, yeah, how much of an overlap there is with the work of Michael Newton and all of the hypnotic regressions and stories that came out of those through the books on Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. There's so much overlap here. I just think that's remarkable.
Yeah.
Peggy, did you have any thoughts on any of this?
For me, it brings out the Albert Brooks movie.
Yeah. Defending your life.
Defending your life.
I don't run across many people who have seen that, so
it's a great.
Really good.
Well,
really
you
good.
know.
Look it up on YouTube. I think it's called Defending Your Life, right?
It is, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
with Meryl Streep.
Yes.
Yeah, such a great, hilarious movie about
But just about this topic, yes, exactly. But yeah, you don't have to defend your life. But it's interesting because I think about this in relation to kind of just even with my mom's death, and thinking about the things that I didn't get finished with her that I wish now I had, and did that impact her ability to move on? And did, and I don't know, but it does make me really think, okay, yeah, be sure you finish the things that you need to finish with people so that they can move on too, that was kind of what came to me with this one. So
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Greg, anything to add?
I have actually said this to people, what they're talking about in the paragraph 1. There will be someone who, when you're sitting with someone who's dying and they're not, usually, often, not always, but they're not responsive. They for one reason or another, they can't talk. They seem to be in a coma or whatever. They may not be. They may be able to hear you. So we always encourage people to speak. And so if I was alone with someone and I knew they were dying, I would say, look for your guide. There will be a guide that comes for you. You will not be alone. Do not be afraid. And it will be someone you recognize. And that, just like paragraph 1, that can be very helpful, even if someone can't respond to you. Say it anyway, The other thing I had, the people that I saw in the hospital had didn't have a lot of resources. They often didn't have insurance. They often didn't, sometimes they didn't have a home, but they had a lot of wisdom. And toward the end of my time at the hospital, I ran into this woman who was with her daughter, and she said the following to me: I'm getting ready to board the plane. I got no luggage under my seat and nothing in the overhead bin. And that was great. I just thought, I will never forget that, because she knew what so many know innately, that you can't take it with you, and not in terms of physical possessions, but your resentments, your anger. Don't take that with you. Resolve it. Resolve everything you can. And if you can't, if someone isn't in front of you that you want to apologize to them anyway, because spirit will hear that, right? You can ask your guides to relay that message.
Yeah, thank you. Such a beautiful thing. And again, yeah, the idea that every soul is unique and will be met with some sort of guardian guide who fits best with them, I think is a beautiful thing. Yeah. It reminds me of the movie Contact with Jodie Foster. Did either of you see that?
I did.
Sure.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
It's just a beautiful movie based on a book written by Carl Sagan. Jodie Foster plays a scientist who becomes the first person on Earth to make contact with what appears to be a very intelligent extraterrestrial race. And when she does make contact, it's really in the form of thoughts and visions that she sees, and they appear to her as her father, because as is shown earlier in the film, she had a very loving, close relationship with her father. So, I mean, they could have manifested as little green aliens if they wanted to, but they thought the best way to make the desired form of contact would be in the form of someone who she really had that loving parent-child relationship with.
That's
Really
beautiful.
beautiful movie.
Yeah, yeah, that is beautiful. And it did seem like when my mom was dying, she was seeing people that she knew. So, I do think that that is, and of course, I'm sure they, like you said, they aren't those people, but that's how they came to her. So, and it was a comfort to her. So,
I wonder if someone who's a very fervent Christian would be disappointed if they're not met by Jesus afterwards. It's like, I was really expecting Jesus and I just got my fucking brother-in-law. I was like, what's up with that?
you're not Jesus.
Yeah, you're not the guy I was expecting. I want to talk to the manager. Yeah. Chill out,
Who's in
Karen.
charge here?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
dear.
But again, it's such a beautiful overlap with Journey of Souls and Michael Newton's work. And
Absolutely.
we are going to have a episode focusing on that in the not that distant future, because
Oh, that's beautiful.
both
Yeah.
Carla and Don were quite familiar with Dr. Newton's work, and they felt that it was very legitimate.
Yeah,
we
we
even found a student of Michael Newton who lived in our area who did past life
does, yeah.
regressions.
and life between
still
lives.
does.
Yeah.
And we both had a
Past life
Past life
regression, and I
regression.
did a life between lives. So yeah, which is how I know that I'm so connected to my mom, and that we have walked lives together, and that she will be one of the people who I see when I pass. So yeah, I love his work. I think I'll be excited to see that podcast. That'll be lovely. And yeah, and for me, it's hard with Christians because they don't always believe you have many lives, and but that's such a comfort to me to know that I have many lives, and that this is just one but many. And I think, I had some comfort with death because I'm able to do that in this life, and I'm able to speak with people, and I'm able to have very intense conversations with them. And it's something I've never shied away from as a nurse. And I was the one they would always call, Peggy, this one's dying. Can you come and help the family?
We got another corpse for you.
Right. Come on in. So, and again, finding humor for these families. I think that was another piece that I think we both can say, your loved one has died, and we were able to stand with family and talk about, tell me a little bit about this person, especially if it's someone who I hadn't had a chance to know. What's your favorite story about them? Or what was their personality like? And the things that people will tell you. And then we would end up in laughter. And it was just a beautiful ability that so many people can be around someone that they've loved who's passed, and they can still find the humor and the goodness and laughter in it. So, to me, that's so important.
For sure. Beautiful healing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm reminded, you had mentioned a little while ago that, none of that stuff that you see as your earthly possessions or whatever you can take with you when you go. And
Yeah.
it did remind me of a passage that I neglected to include in this session, but where Quo did say basically something to the effect that it's the experiences you have in love, it's the lessons that you learn about love.
Mhm.
That's the stuff that's recorded in the soul. And that is indeed the stuff that you do, in fact, take with you into the next incarnation. And I think it's a beautiful perspective to remember every moment of every day you can to cultivate those experiences. And as they said, everything else in this life is just the means to that end. Whatever else you do in this life is really just a means to learn those lessons. So.
Right.
And that's that fifth remembrance of in that Thich Nhat Hanh meditation. It's that, it's the actions that we walk with is what we take with us, so.
Yeah. I think we've got one more topic and one more set of a couple passages to look at. Did you guys have anything to add on this subject of post-incarnation review before we move on?
No,
I don't.
think so, no.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead then and take a look at a couple passages on celebrating death. I have two passages from the March 5th, 2006 session, and this is one passage. Quo said, "From the vantage point of time-space, then, when an entity returns to the larger self, or the soul stream, as this instrument has called the larger self, there is that sense of never having been gone that you have when you visit old friends who have been apart for years. Somehow they pick up right where they left off, if the relationship is a good one. And to your soul stream, the you that comes back to that soul stream is not at all a prodigal son, but rather a returning hero. Each of you has a great deal of courage, and you have showed that by taking incarnation at all. It is a risk of a high caliber. You may forget to wake up. You may forget to perform your mission. You may pass on working upon the lessons that you wanted to learn. When you return from an incarnation and look at the pattern that you have created, you may find that you have missed some opportunities that on hindsight you are sorry that you missed. Nevertheless, every incarnation is perfect. There are no mistakes. And when you return home from this illusionary experience of life on earth, there is a fullness to your experience that was not there before. You have added to the self in ways that you know not while in our incarnation, and you have given a harvest of new information to the one infinite creator. It is a joyful time, and it is though you had never been gone." That again is something else that I think I have seen mentioned in the Journey of Souls work from Michael Newton. They do say that when you leave this incarnation and return to where you came from, you rejoin that soul family that you have incarnated with many times before. And in many ways, it seems like you just went around the block to get a carton of milk or pack of cigarettes or whatever it was.
So there's something I could mention briefly that ties into that. Jim McCarty has talked about dreams. We might ask him about a dream we had or something, and he'd say, "Oh, I think dreams are you're remembering your pre-incarnative experiences," and that really stuck with me. And lately, I've been having dreams where I'm in a play, or I'm putting on a costume, or I'm going over lines, or I'm forgetting my lines, to typical dream thing, like, what am I supposed to say? But it's always about, or maybe going to a movie. I have tons of those lately. And I thought of that when I was hearing about this, about when you go back. I think I'm having glimpses of what it was like back there when we were talking about what we were going to do here. And we could go talk to Jonathan Tong and have this amazing talk, and it'll be fantastic. We talked about this.
And it was fantastic. What a cool thing to imagine, contemplate that. Yes, the three of us, this is not the first time we've done this dance together, and that we had the opportunity to meet each other and reconnect. And have actual remembrance of having done this before. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
And that has been an experience that I know I've had, and Greg has had also, when we have, particularly the first time walking into the LL research event in North Carolina, and really feeling like, oh my God, I know these people. These are people who I have walked lives with. And I mean, particularly, I certainly have felt that with very specific individuals that I've met through LL research and channelings and such, where it's like, oh, you and the other person will agree, oh yeah, we've known each other from before this, so it's always very interesting to really know that there are those soul connections here that I have walked with many times. And I have a sister and her niece who I know I've walked with many times. Greg and I have walked many times together. So it's, yeah, I find a lot of comfort in that whole piece of thinking and knowing that this is my soul family. These are people who I've been with. And again, kind of from those regressions, having a better understanding of what was my lesson that I really needed to learn when I came back for this life. That was so helpful to me. And that has really been, it's been a blessing to me, particularly with illness. So to really know that.
So beautiful, which I would say is a good reminder to me to remind our viewers that there's lots of different Law of One study groups out there, and Greg and Peggy facilitate their own Law of One study group called, I believe, the Open Heart Law of One study group.
Law of One study group, yes.
We'll put the contact information on the screen, I think, in a few minutes when we finish up here. Otherwise, just to let folks know, if you are a Law of One student and you really resonate with this stuff, but you're not really connected with a group, or you don't really have any other people you can talk with, it can be just a really wonderful thing to connect with any group. Find one that vibes with you, that you vibe with, and there's a good chance that you'll be meeting spirits that you have met before and worked with before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I did have one other passage from the same session that I wanted to look at that may perhaps help us kind of wrap this whole thing up. Did either of you have anything else you wanted to say on this screen before I change it?
No, I just think that nevertheless, every incarnation is perfect. There are no mistakes. Walk with that. Hold it close in your heart, because that is the truth. You learn what you're supposed to learn. You go on and you figure it out the next time around if you didn't catch everything this time. So, yeah.
People
cannot overemphasize that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. People can be very hard on themselves when they're dying. They say, "Oh, why didn't I do this? Why did I do all that smoking or whatever?" And the job, as it said elsewhere in one of these quotes, is to forgive yourself, heal yourself, start with yourself. Compassion begins at home. And it's easy to say that, hard to do. But maybe that's the best lesson you can learn, when you're at the end of life. That you did okay,
Cannot say that enough times. Thank you so much for reiterating that. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more passage from this same session. This one has been edited for brevity, but here Quo said, "We find that your culture does not have the kind of relationship with death that allows the comfort factor to increase beyond a certain point. Entities feel that to some extent they need to be solemn and serious, even if the entity has been very ill and full of years and ready in many different ways and on several different levels to move on. There is a knee-jerk reaction of feeling that it is a sad and negative occurrence, that somehow it would have been better had the person been able to live on. Again, from a standpoint of time-space, this is an awkward and even primitive attitude, shall we say, not taking into consideration the marvelous experience that it is, especially when one has been limited, as the one known as E, unable to speak because of strokes and so forth. We salute the tremendous love that went into these rituals for the one known as E, and yet we simply comment that were the culture to be more comfortable with the concept of the physical death and to be able to separate this event from any thought of an ending of any kind for that soul, the obsequies would become festivities, and sorrow would contain a great deal more of joy among your peoples. Yeah, I think it is. It is worth highlighting, I think, that we have really ingrained into us, programmed into us from a very early age to have this knee-jerk response to death that, oh, it's automatically a sad thing and a negative occurrence. And as they're saying, if you could look at it from a more enlightened perspective, shall we say, that it would actually be cause for a great celebration. Even those deaths that seem not that happy, not that great cause for celebration, at least to acknowledge, based on what we've heard so far, that however that death was, it was something that was pre-planned incarnatively, and that it is a cause for celebration, however the end of that adventure was. Did you have anything to add on this, Peggy? Any thoughts on this?
I would say a couple of things. One, we make someone else's death about us. And that is where so much of the sadness and pain comes from. Because if we really think about the person and everything that they've been through in their lives, and I just had this conversation with a family member yesterday about a death in our family, and the person saying to me, well, had she just done this differently, and had she just done this differently, and she could have lived longer. And I'm like, no, wait, this was her life. This was her journey. She had a good life. She was happy. She was ready to go. So again, I think sometimes the perspective gets so placed on ourselves versus really keeping it with the person who has moved on. And again, to me, the point that I made before about standing with people after someone has died or as someone's dying and talking about who this person is, that what are your most fondest memories? What did they like to do? Just kind of pulling out some of those ideas and questions, and you often will get a very joyous response, and you'll get some very funny, get some funny responses, and it lightens the room. So I think remembering to go back to the person who's dying, tell us about their life. What was important in their life? What was important to them? And keeping the focus on that person versus everybody's sadness around them. So, and we have grief, we will, and we have to go through those pieces of grief. But again, always going back to the person and their life, what was important in that.
So beautifully said. And I think it kind of reminds me as you're speaking that so often we're programmed to think about the quality of years that we can get versus the quantity. And there's kind of an unspoken assumption that the greatest quantity is the same thing as the greatest quality. And that's not necessarily the case. I think it is in many ways something that's used to prop up the medical industrial complex or the pharmaceutical industrial complex. This just assumption that milking every last dollar we can out of somebody to keep them on prolonged life support well past the time that they really had intended is not necessarily in their best self-interest.
And or continuing treatments when they're no longer of any benefit and that they're actually causing the person a quicker decline than they are of any help. So again, I think we do need to think about these things, and remembering always that the medical system is a for-profit even though, they're all not for profits, but they are for profit, right? And I think people are, again, it's training. Doctors have not been taught to be comfortable with death. They have not been taught how to speak about it. And this is hence part of the problem also. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we ran into that all the time. I mean, palliative care was created to communicate with families about end of life issues and to make the tough decisions. In large part because other physicians just can't handle it. They see it as a failure. Oh, the patient's dying. I must have done something wrong, or I failed. And that's a really unfortunate attitude they picked up. But that's, what happens in medical education.
For sure. And that reminds me, I think there are two important questions that I think I wanted to ask the both of you. We have mentioned cancer earlier, and since cancer is, I believe, the #2 cause of death for adults in the US, any advice you might offer someone who has received, let's just say, a terminal cancer diagnosis and is having to make that decision whether or not to do chemo or radiation or whatever?
So from my perspective, being in that situation personally myself, I think, and having watched many patients, I think of many things. First off, cancer is a word that has been made to incite fear. And so if we can pull ourselves away from the fear, that's helpful. Second is, depending on, you really have to make decisions depending upon your physical body and how strong your physical body is, because every treatment that is offered comes with side effects that will decline your physical body further, because they can't isolate, for the most part, these treatments don't isolate just the cancer. They're attacking some of your normal cells also. So if your body is not strong enough to begin with, then you're going to decline likely more quickly. Hospice is that opportunity, though we say people have 6 months or less to live when we initiate hospice with a terminal diagnosis. Many people, because the focus is on quality of life and on keeping symptoms controlled and on giving them the control over what they do and don't do, that many people actually do better and survive longer.
Without chemo?
Without chemo, without radiation. So I think, again, prayer is important. Strong belief in, in care for yourself. Take care of those emotional issues, because I think that they continue to degrade our cells. And so if you can work at some of those, I think that that's helpful. If you can tolerate treatment and that's something you want to do, go for it. But know that at some point you might not be able to tolerate it, and you need to have, between yourself and your loved one, someone who's going to say enough's enough, and we're done. I mean, I just think of many patients who, the cancer progressed and the family and patient said, nope, no more. And those folks went home and they did fine for many, many, many months. Some of them coming back a year later. And we were like, wow, you did great, So, so again, I just think it's very dependent on how aggressive the cancer is and how your physical body is and what your mental approach is.
Well said. Again, a reminder that every soul is unique, every spiritual journey is unique, and what works for one doesn't necessarily work for others.
And I would say, with that, that whatever decision you make, trust that you're making the right decision for yourself.
Well said.
Don't be afraid to follow your heart.
Yeah.
Well said. Anything else you wanted to add on that, Greg?
I've
Because I was
learned,
going to ask a different question, but wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on this if you had more to share.
I feel that I have a good network of protectors and angels, and I've done a lot of work every day directing good energy this direction. And so far, so good. So
Yeah.
never underestimate your own power. People think when they, especially when they get a bad diagnosis, they're powerless. They are not. Take time for yourself. Think, do some research. Don't rush into anything, even though some people may be making you feel urgency. There may not be, that may not be valid. Don't be afraid to look for, do something that's true to you, and the that has the whole of the universe behind you.
And do your
So
work
important.
about dying, because every one of us is going to leave the planet at some time. So, whether it's today, tomorrow, 2 years from now, you just make sure you're ready, because one never knows, right? So don't be afraid to delve into death. It's okay.
Which would include, of course, the writing of a will, so that
That's
there's
right.
no question over what your wishes were as far as your earthly possessions and how that may
Absolutely.
go.
Sure.
Yeah.
There is a form called 5 Wishes that is put out by a for-profit group. I think you have to pay for it, but it's really good because it gives you the chance to tell your family what kind of music you want at your funeral, what, and all that kind of detail. And you really can, and it's actually quite interesting. And
Any advice for someone who wants to write a will but cannot afford attorney's fees for that?
oh, but you could do that. You could do living will.
Well, I guess the two separate issues. You can always do healthcare, like living wills, healthcare power of attorneys. All of that
Right.
is all done free of charge.
Yeah, you don't need a lawyer.
You don't need lawyers for that. Financially, I think really if you can't afford a lawyer and you have certain things that you want given to certain people or whatever the situation is, I would absolutely have it written down, and, in whatever format, have your signature, your date, the date that you made it. I would have 2 witnesses and or a notary, so that it is can be looked at as a legal document in the event of your death. So, but again, you can always, and the other thing is like take care of those financial things. If you've got a bank account, make sure somebody else's that you trust is on your bank account so that they can get
Or has
to
your passwords, or
Yeah.
at least can get access to your passwords.
Yes, that's another key thing these days, is making sure you've got your passwords all written down somewhere and that somebody knows it. I think that's a key piece too with the internet. So
I think many have learned the hard way about how difficult that is for surviving folks if they do not have password access to your accounts that you would wish them to have access to.
Right.
yes.
And the point of all that is to keep your mind clear, not to, if it's one less thing to worry about, then you have a better chance of being in the right frame of mind at the critical moment, so that you can, because so many people believe that your state of mind determines your afterlife, your experience of the afterlife. So you may not believe that, I don't know, but give it the benefit of the doubt, just in case it's true. You may want to plan ahead just in case they're right.
Just a little bit, right? And I'll say for both Greg and I, with our parents, particularly his dad and my mom, both my mom and dad, they had everything in order when they died. So it was so, I mean, their funerals had been
Yeah, they
paid for,
prepaid for
everything was
everything.
done. And so we were able to just enjoy that time versus having to worry about, oh, how are we going to pay for this? What, what's this? So it just made it so much easier. So I would encourage everybody, if you have the resources, and again, there's so much on the internet too right now that it's not that expensive, where you can go and find documents to be able to complete.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah.
I have one more legal question for you, and that is about euthanasia. Given this country's laws around such a thing, do you have any advice for individuals who would like to have more autonomy, more agency on how they choose to end their incarnation?
So I think there are only about 12 states right now that have dignity to die laws. And give me just a second, I can actually tell you which ones they are. And I think there's another maybe 7 or 8 states that are in the process of passing legislation, or that there's some legislation pending. The problem is that you can't just move, you can't just go to that state. You have to have been a resident of that state. I think most of them have that qualifier. I would say that for those people who are wanting to have a comfortable death, to consider, if you're not in a state that is has a dignity to die law, that you definitely consider, if you have a terminal diagnosis, that you definitely consider hospice, because at least with hospice, they're going to make sure that you have medication to keep you comfortable, and that, the whole idea is we don't want you dying in distress. So and many, and I say this, all drugs have a double effect, right? So it's going to help control our pain, and it also may affect our respiratory system. So in keeping someone comfortable, that may hasten, and I hate using that word, because that's one piece about hospice that many people have issues, but that, oh, I don't want to do anything to hasten their death. Well, we don't want anyone dying with discomfort and pain and in respiratory distress. So let's use the medications that are available to help them die a dignified death. And so for someone who is considering, really they're done with whatever illness, and you have to have a terminal illness, but if you don't have that ability to do the dignity with dying, hospice can at least make sure that you are very comfortable toward the end of your time.
What do the dignity with death laws do for an individual? What rights, powers does it give an individual?
It does give them the right to have medications administered that will bring about their death.
Under what conditions?
Under the conditions of a terminal illness, oftentimes it has to be 2 physicians who agree that that's a terminal illness. And there usually is somewhat of a time frame of consideration for patients before it'll be allowed. But usually, I think anymore, it's about terminal illness and 2 physicians in agreement. And you have to find a physician who's willing to participate. But in the states that do have dignity to die laws, there are physicians in all of those states.
So helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Greg, did you have anything to add?
Spiritually, everything that we have been talking about points to a plan and a catalyst. And personally, I encourage people to stick around to the end of the story and see how it turns out. Because I don't know. I think taking a shortcut is not, if you're kind of sidestepping your own plan.
Indeed.
Personally, that's why I have a different opinion on it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your sharing that. And once again, a reminder that each soul is unique and each journey is unique and pretty much up to each entity, I think, to make those choices along with the people who are there close with and so on. Why don't we go ahead and wrap things up and let's ask ourselves, where do we go from here? What are some perhaps good takeaway lessons from our 2.5 hour discussion so far? I might suggest 4 things perhaps to remember, and that is one, that if you did not know this already, to know that you and your higher self didn't in fact plan your death, and that if that helps ease your mind and worries about that, I know it certainly did for me. So insofar as you can believe anything else that we've seen in channeling sessions, I would definitely take some comfort in that. Second, in looking at aging as a sign that you have maximized your ability to process catalyst, and it's a reminder that the incarnation is nearing an end. So if there are still entities, relationships you have not made peace with, it would be a really great time to do that, or any other lessons that you came here to learn. And yeah, I would say nice to know that everything after death is good, regardless of what your religious or non-religious beliefs are, that as far as we can tell, it's only good stuff that happens, and that your family's going to be okay, everything will be fine, and that everything that happens after that will be fine too. And that indeed, death is not sad. It is, if anything, a cause for celebration. I would say those would be great things to remember. Greg, do you have any takeaway lessons of your own you'd like to add, or any last closing thoughts on this subject?
Don't be afraid to incorporate a little death reminder into your daily meditative practice. I'm only here for a short time. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. Oh, help me to do the best I can today and every day. Something like that.
Beautiful reminder.
We'll be doing something that all people do all around the world, but we're not taught to do that in our culture. So you'll be doing something really good for yourself, I think.
Well said. Peggy, anything to add?
I would say take the opportunity every time you are with, you have a family gathering, to have discussions with family about, hey, what do you want at the end of your life? Thanksgiving's a good time. What are we
great family gatherings.
What are we thankful for? Hey, So I think that those are opportunities that we can take. We don't have to make it uncomfortable, morbid, sad. You can do it with levity and keep your sense of humor about it, but have those conversations, because it will help you when you find yourself in that situation. It'll be a blessing.
I'm reminded of something, one thing that we mentioned, which is that, oftentimes there are entities on their deathbed who are just holding out until so-and-so can arrive from long distance so they can say their goodbyes before they part ways.
That happens all the time.
Yep.
There was also something that I remember you mentioned in our breakout session at the gathering that I'm not sure if you have mentioned yet, and that is that it is not uncommon for those who are in their final stages to be basically out of it, shall we say, for a prolonged period of time, but then to have some moments of clarity and lucidity for a somewhat brief period of time before they lapse back. Can you comment on that as far as why that might be and what someone might want to know about that?
So most of the time, as we're getting to the end of our lives, we do kind of go into a very comatose type state. But again, as the physiology is changing in our body, and I believe that it's a spiritual change that's happening too, that can sometimes cause that those moments of lucidity to happen. And some people will take that as, oh my gosh, they're getting better, but oftentimes that is just a piece of the dying process. So, I don't take it as, oh, everything's changed, now we're hopeful they're going to live, but it is that opportunity where you can have some last words with someone, you can say something that you needed to say, or just tell them you love them. I mean, I can't say that enough. I think those are the kindest words we can say to people at the end of life, is that you are loved. You are love. You are going to love. So just keep saying those.
Yeah, very non-denominational and universal, I would say.
Mm.
Greg, anything you wanted to add on that particular subject?
And often people prefer to die alone.
Mhm.
Families feel that they need to have someone there at the bedside 24/7. And I can tell you that's exhausting. It is just exhausting. And by the end, people are just can hardly, function. And yet then they have to do all this planning and activity after someone dies.
Mhm.
So be good to yourself and don't feel that you need to be there all the time. A lot of people just need, prefer to die alone, and they actually will wait until everybody leaves the room
Mhm.
and then make their exit.
Mhm.
And that has happened that happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, don't take it personal.
Yeah.
Because, it's a private thing, right? Dying is a personal, private thing too. So some people do much prefer to be alone when they take their last breath.
Thank you for remembering to add that, because I think that is, again, on a long list of things that you've shared today that I think our viewers find really helpful to know. So you who are watching this on video, I hope you have found at least a couple things from our discussion today that are worth remembering. And I did want to let our viewers know that, if you enjoyed hanging out with Greg and Peggy today, you might want to check out the Law of One study group that they facilitate. They are on the list of study groups at the L&L research page that I showed at the very beginning of this video. I believe the name, I think, has changed from what we're seeing on screen right now. Is that correct, Greg, Peggy?
Yes, we should change it to Open Heartland Law of One study group, and we will.
But it is currently listed as Heartland Law of One Study Group, and there's a beautiful description under there, which we could read through together if we wanted to, or somebody can read it off the screen. But yes, Greg and Peggy are listed with their proper names as facilitators for the group, as is our good friend BJ Harden-Jones, who has facilitated the Temple of the Open Heart Study Group based in Asheville for many years. So this is a super group if there ever was one, and a great meeting of hearts and
We have
minds.
really nice meetings and discussions. We're focusing on the raw contact.
Yeah, we do the books, the raw materials. So.
Nice. Yes, and I do see Greg's email listed below as a contact. So viewers, if you have any other questions that you would like to ask about the subject of today's podcast, that seems like a great way to contact and ask your questions.
Yeah.
I welcome that.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is, as you may or may not know, time to end our time together. Pop quiz is just kind of something that we do typically at the end of our podcast sessions, just to end our time together on a fun note and maybe add some light and levity to what could otherwise be interpreted as heavy and serious discussions. So since we talked about celebrating death, it seems only fitting that we should have a pop quiz on what is arguably the best celebration of death on planet Earth. It is that beautiful tradition associated most often with Mexico, but celebrated in other Latin American countries too. It's a time of celebration that includes decorating altars dedicated to those who have passed on to the spirit world, partying out in cemeteries, dressing up as skeletons, making and eating delicious food. I am talking about what celebration, panelists?
Day of the Dead.
Indeed. also known as Dia de los Muertos. Beautiful celebration. Do you guys know much about it already? Have you ever been to Mexico during that time or any other time?
I have
We've
not.
been to the Mexican Fine Arts Museum at that time in Chicago. It's quite something.
And it was really wonderful.
Quite
Yeah.
amazing, amazing altars, ofrendas.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it has been a hope and dream of mine to go to Oaxaca during the Day of the Dead celebrations, where it just seems to be such a beautiful, joyful way to celebrate death, as opposed to seeing it as sad and something to be feared.
So Peggy's got a niece who's married to a Hispanic fellow, and on their shipbook shelves, on the top shelf, you have a whole array of photos and mementos of their family who have passed. And it's not just one day; it's every day.
Yeah.
It's very, very nice.
Yeah.
Actually.
Okay, and Jonathan, we'll meet you in Oaxaca.
Yes. And
All right.
every day is the Day of the Dead.
My
If you're
next
doing it right.
trip, it's going to be at the Day of the Dead.
That'd be so awesome. Yeah, that'd be so great. Well, today I'm going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about Dia de los Muertos. See how many you can answer correctly. If you are watching this on video, go ahead and say your answers out loud. We can hear you through time space. As always, the points don't matter. If you had fun, you won. And if you learned something interesting about our beautiful brothers and sisters who live in or came from that beautiful country of Mexico, you won as well. First question. May or may not be difficult for you. When is Dia de los Muertos celebrated? Is it A, October 31st and November 1st, B, November 1st and 2nd, or C, November 3rd and 4th?
Oh, gosh, that's
tricky.
Yeah, I would say November 1st and 2nd.
Oh, no, I
You
would
think
say
it's
A.
October? You think it's A?
Yeah.
All right.
Ooh.
Well, we have a disagreement.
Nice. Like every other married couple I know.
That's right. Okay.
Well, the correct answer traditionally is B, November 1st and 2nd. Traditionally, it's celebrated on those 2 days because it's divided into 2 days to honor the deceased. And that division aligns with the Catholic holidays of All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd, which were incorporated into the celebration after the Spaniards colonized Mexico. But it is worth noting that other days, including October 31st or November 6th, may be added depending on the locality. So
yeah,
both got points on that one, I would say.
No,
1.5 points we'll give it to you. Let's see how you do on your second question. Second question. What animals are most closely associated with celebrations of Dia de los Muertos? Is it A, monarch butterflies, B, Mexican swallows, or C, Xoloitzcuintli?
Mama. I'd say A.
Gosh, I just remember that. I don't know. I just remember the dogs,
Well, that's true. Yeah,
and
it's true,
I don't
dogs.
know whether that's C or not. So I'm going to go with C.
What?
Bonus points for you for knowing what C was. Yeah, that's pretty good indeed.
Yeah, it's true. She's right about the dogs. That is, you see that a lot.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, we'll definitely give you partial points for that. But indeed, probably the closest best answer would be the monarch butterflies.
My first thought, best thought.
For those who didn't know this, yeah, monarch butterflies are closely intertwined with Mexico's Day of the Dead, with many believing that the butterflies embody the spirits of deceased loved ones returning for the festivities. This belief stems from the timing of the butterfly migrations, which coincides with the November 1st and 2nd celebrations. Millions of monarch butterflies migrate every year from the eastern United States to Mexico and back. And yes, if you haven't seen pictures or videos before, It is a mind-blowingly beautiful thing to witness millions of monarch butterflies returning, landing. I think there is some special forest in Michoacan, which is not far from Mexico City, referred to as the soul of Mexico. And yes, as they return, they cover the leaves, they cover the trunks with butterflies. And so, yeah, very much a beautiful synchronicity, I guess you could say, in that case.
We saw them one year on their migration path. We were in Canada at Point Pelee, and they were just starting their migration. It was the end of September because it was my mom's birthday. And again, all over trees, branches. It was just amazing. and it was in a storm. There was, it was crazy. It was wonderful.
Such a beautiful thing and such a beautiful way to coincide with Day of the Dead celebration.
Well, I think I get most of the credit for that because I said it, at least to begin with.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
Before I started backtracking.
Well, you are correct that the Xoloitzcuintli, also known as the Mexican hairless dog, is actually considered a part of those celebrations too. They go back long ways, tracing back more than 3,000 years to the Aztecs, I believe. And those dogs were considered sacred and to have spiritual powers of being able to guide the souls after life. That's why the one dog was a central character in the Disney movie Coco, which was about Day of the Dead and such. And Dante, the name of that dog, did actually serve as guardian for Miguel as he went back to the spirit world. So I'm going to give you half points for that one too. I'd say, yeah.
All right. I think
you're batting 1,000. I don't keep score on this and I don't give a shit what the score is, but I think you're doing pretty well. And kudos to you watching on video who got 2 for 2. So
yeah, all right. This is the tiebreaker here.
So your last question, which may or may not be difficult for you. What flowers are most commonly used to celebrate Day of the Dead? Is it A, carnations, B, chrysanthemums, or C, marigolds?
Wow. That's tough. I would say C because I'm also thinking of the Indian culture, marigolds. I don't know.
What do you think, Peggy?
I'll go with marigolds because I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm gonna go with you.
Well said. Crushed it.
All right.
Yeah. Marigolds are a central symbol in Dia de los Muertos, partly because of their colors. It's kind of that same orange color that we saw with the monarch butterflies that we see with that time of year. They also have a very musky scent, which is believed to guide the spirits of the deceased loved ones back to the world of living. So families often use marigolds to decorate their altars or ofrendas, as Greg mentioned, and often use petals to create paths leading from the cemeteries back to people's homes and such. Well done.
Beautiful. Those are beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a beautiful celebration.
I learned something today too.
Yeah. I learned a lot.
I learned a lot from you guys the last time and from this discussion as well. So again, cannot thank you enough for being here and being of service to our viewers, for being able to share some wisdom and love and compassion and help them hopefully make peace with death if they have not done so already. So Greg and Peggy, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. For you who are watching this on video at some time in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light and we are receiving yours. Until next time, in love and light of the one infinite creator. Adonai. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Love you.
Love you.